Welcome to the Classic Cinema Society podcast, and it's time to commence to dancing. I'm your host, Chris Pistol. Every episode, I bring on a guest to discuss a classic movie, and we talk about its place in cinema history and how it holds up today. Today, I'm joined by Zach Strauss, and we're talking about Way Out West, a Stan Laurel production. Roll clip. Some say they're the greatest comedy duo of all time. Stan Laurel and Oliver Hardy were two of the biggest film stars of the 1930s, with their blend of slapstick and farcical comedies. Stan Laurel was a Chaplin-esque English comedian, and maybe has the funniest dumb smile I've ever seen, while his partner Oliver Hardy donned the Chaplin mustache and was a much bigger presence, literally. Stan and Ollie made over 60 shorts and 27 feature comedies together, with Way Out West cited as one of the most iconic. Way Out West was directed by James H. Horn, who also directed the Buster Keaton film College. The film tells the story of our comedic duo as they enter an old western town to deliver the deed of a gold mine to the sweet and Cinderella-like Mary. However, the crooked saloon owner and his wife pull a fast one on Stan and Ollie and take the deed for themselves. It's up to Stan and Ollie to get the deed back and correct their hapless mistake. There's breaking and entering, a hilarious flying mule, and some comedic musical numbers. And did I mention it's only an hour long? This film was chosen by podcaster, former co-host, all-around okay guy, all the way from Burbank, California, Zach Strauss.
How's it going, everybody? Chris, it's so good to see you again, man. It's been a long time since we podcasted together, so I'm very excited to join you on your own show.
Well, Zach, here's another nice mess you've gotten us into.
Indeed, it is a very nice mess. I'm very excited to talk about Laurel and Hardy with you and tell people who Laurel and Hardy are, because they're two of the greatest human beings ever, in my opinion.
And we're the only two people left on the planet who know who they are.
Oh, gosh. I hope that's not true.
Well, before we dive into the film today, let's get to know our guest. So, Zach, tell us a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your film journey.
Oh, get to know me. Okay, well, I grew up in Los Angeles, in Burbank, surrounded by film studios, so it was kind of natural for me to, I think, just fall in love with movies. Went to Universal Studios growing up, loved the studio tour, the old school studio tour with the animatronic King Kong and the Flood and the Earthquake is still there, the good stuff. Yeah, Jaws. The bridge, the collapsing bridge. Anyway, I don't know why I'm talking about the studio tour. I love movies. We did a podcast about horror movies and pop culture and all that fun stuff. But another love I have of mine that was instilled in me at a very young age was classic comedy, which I didn't get to talk about really too much on another Miserable podcast. A little bit. I think we talked about Abbott and Costello for a sec. But my dad was a big fan of like the Marx Brothers and Abbott and Costello. But his favorite comedy team, and the greatest comedy team of all time, in my opinion, was Laurel and Hardy. And so he showed me a lot of their movies when I was a kid. And for those that don't know, Laurel and Hardy, they were a comedy team from the late 20s through like 1951. And they would show a lot of their early shorts, which are called two-reelers. Two-reeler is like a 20-minute. In the early 1900s, everything was like a two-reeler. But that phrase is known as like short comedic films from like the early 1900s. And so they did a lot of two-reelers, and they did some three-reelers, and then eventually they did a lot of feature films. So this is in the silent era where they started out, and then they transitioned to talkies eventually, which is really how I know more through their talkies. But some of their silent films are great as well. They did, they did so many movies together. 107 films altogether that they appeared in as a team. 32 of those were silent films, 40 were sound movies, 23 were full-length films. I definitely have not seen everything.
What?
Yeah, I've seen a good amount of it, but I've not seen everything.
You call yourself an expert.
And if those people were doing math there and going, wait, that math doesn't check out, there were like 12 things that weren't Laurel and Hardy movies, but like they appeared in as a team, like kind of Hollywood variety, shows and appearances and things like that.
And at least one thing that they were in separately, controversially.
Yes, they did a few things separately, and before they were Laurel and Hardy, Laurel had worked in over 50 films as a writer and director. Ollie had acted in over 250 productions before Laurel and Hardy. He actually was like almost in a kind of a team before Laurel and Hardy. But Stan Laurel, when he was younger, he joined Fred Karno's touring troupe of actors in like 1910. And Fred Karno, for those that don't know, is one of the pioneers of physical comedy and slapstick. He pioneered the pie in the face gag, among other things. And speaking of Charlie Chaplin, Stan Laurel was his understudy in that troupe. So there's a lot of pedigree there.
Wow.
But they eventually both joined Hal Roach Studios, which produced the most famous and the best Laurel and Hardy shorts. They were there for like 20 years before eventually kind of moving to like MGM and things like that. But the MGM actually produced with, I guess, Hal Roach. Those movies were distributed. So Hal Roach Studios, for those that don't know anything about Hal Roach, sorry, I'm just kind of going on about this. I don't want to interfere with your structure. I
asked you to tell me a little bit about yourself, and you're giving me the entire history of Laurel and Hardy.
I'm not that interesting. I worked for a production company in Los Angeles that produces some of the biggest horror movies around. I will not say anything more about that. Deal. Yeah, I mean, I'm just an office, coordinator there. It's not that exciting, but that's just my day job. And then at night, I like to watch movies. I'm Batman. This is true. Don't tell anybody. And no, I'm probably more like Captain Underpants, honestly. But yeah, I just I love the way movies transport.
I know
you're so.
I know you said you were a big comedy fan and you've been watching Laurel and Hardy since you were a kid. Was that your sort of like gateway, I guess, into old movies, or would you call that like a gateway into old movies? And what is it about it that kind of gave you, I guess, an appreciation for classic movies?
It was definitely one of the gateways, that and like a lot of the Abbott and Costello monster movies, I would say, and the Marx Brothers, things like that. Hitchcock as well, probably. He was probably a smidge later on, but they were certainly one of the gateways for me. There's something Laurel and Hardy specifically, and Abbott and Costello to a different extent, but there's something so kind of pure about what they do, and that you don't see in modern cinema. No offense to the MCU and all that kind of stuff.
Sure.
Laurel and Hardy. It's like there wasn't any, I was going to say there wasn't any thought to what they were doing, but certainly there was a lot of thought, but they were so natural at what they did. It's a masterclass in slapstick and physical comedy, everything they do. But there was the stories were all simple. Their productions weren't lavish compared to, if you watch like the Marx Brothers even, or like Abbott and Costello, some of those things, but are teaming with stars. And not that Laurel and Hardy didn't, do things with, other comedians and stuff like that, but they were kind of more simple stories, but they were, and they kind of go off the hinges.
Is it true that he's dead?
Well, we hope he is. They buried him.
Oh, it can't be. What did he die of?
I think he died of a Tuesday. Or was it Wednesday? Do you remember?
I'll handle this delicate situation. Remember, every cloud has a silver lining.
That's right. Any bird can build a nest, but it isn't everyone that can lay an egg. Is it, Ollie?
That's right.
It's very like cartoon-esque as well. Like, I mean, they feel like almost like Warner Brothers characters. I mean, I know for me, like when I was a kid, I also, one of the gateways to old movies for me was Jerry Lewis and Dean Martin.
Yeah, them
which
as well.
I saw a couple of, but that didn't really like totally get me into old movies. That wasn't until later, but they were very much like cartoons, which I think a lot of kids can sort of relate to.
100%. Yeah. And it was just it just transports you when you watch them. It was just a simpler time, and there's just something so charming about what they do, and so innocent about what they do, and just the shenanigans they get themselves into. The thing about Laurel and Hardy is the more you watch them, the more you get them, and that's really kind of, I can point you to a few different Laurel and Hardy shorts, and we'll talk about lots of different things. But the more you see of them, the more you're like, oh, these guys are fucking brilliant. Like, you can watch a couple of them and like laugh and think it's funny, and you'll kind of get the basic gist of them. But the more you watch them, the more you see them build up on different gags, and just Stan Laurel's mannerisms, and Oliver's just his perfect, deadpans to the camera. No one's had a better relationship with the camera probably than Oliver Hardy. It's just
For
the
sure.
more that you watch them, the more you understand. And I will share quotes from a lot of famous people and stuff later on that just knew their brilliance, like Dick Van Dyke and things like that, and can kind of describe better than I can why they're so great. But I think
Well,
they transported me to it. It was a simple, Citizen Kane's great. And certainly that's one thing that kind of introduced me to classic movies as well. But I think Laurel and Hardy,
not the funniest movie.
Not the funniest movie. But Laurel and Hardy it was easy to follow. You can just watch it, and it's as visual as it is. And not that the dialogue is, they have some hilarious one-liners, but it's just something that you don't need to turn your brain on to watch. You can just enjoy it and catch all the nuances later on,
Well, the movie you chose to talk about today is Way Out West.
Yeah.
So do you remember the first time that you saw it, and what was your?
I don't remember
Was it Love at First Sight?
I always Love at First Sight. I do not remember the first time I saw it. I was probably middle school or high school, I'm assuming, in that 13 year old range, probably 14 or something like that.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't remember the exact first time I saw it, but
you were just a bleary-eyed kitten.
Yeah,
and couldn't fully open your eyes yet.
Probably literally blurry-eyed, because around then I needed to get glasses.
Same. I was in 4th grade, and I remember when I got glasses, I was like, "The trees have leaves on them." Well, this was my first time, and I loved it. I think I've only seen one other Laurel and Hardy film, and that was Sons of the Desert, and I don't remember it too well. I think that I probably saw it like 2017, somewhere around then.
Sons of the Desert is fun, but it's not the best Laurel and Hardy. That's one of their features, not one of the ones I would introduce. Like Laurel, like if it's your first time seeing Laurel and Hardy, I wouldn't go, "Oh, watch Sons of the Desert." It's fun, but it's a little bit. I rewatched it recently, and it's kind of quiet in parts and a little slower than their usual thing. There's not as much musical accompaniment with that, though there is a musical number. It's a fun movie, but I don't think it like epitomizes Laurel and Hardy. So it's not how I would introduce someone to them as much as
I think my reaction to Sons of the Desert. Sons
of the Desert.
I think. Yeah, that movie. I think my reaction to that one was more like, "Oh, this has like aged a bit. Like I feel the age of this." But this one, I definitely didn't. Like I said, this felt like a live action Looney Tunes cartoon.
It is
in a lot of ways.
And I'm sure they inspired Looney Tunes in a lot of ways. I'm sure the people that
they were Looney Tunes.
Yeah, they were.
There's a famous Looney Tunes cartoon where they go to like the Brown Derby, I think, and you see a lot of like famous Hollywood caricatures, and Laurel and Hardy are one of them.
Yeah.
I also saw Stan and Ollie, the film starring Steve Coogan and John C. Reilly when it came out.
Yeah, it's great.
A few years ago. So that was kind of my like, as far as like knowledge goes, introduction to Laurel and Hardy.
It's an interesting introduction, because that's like, that movie is set during like the retirement tour in, I think, England, and Britain, and so it's very kind of sad and very poignant. And it's like, as a big Laurel and Hardy fan, like I love seeing it, but it's like not really. I think there's maybe a couple scenes of them in their prime. I think one of them maybe was like when they were shooting the music box or something at the beginning of the movie. But that's an interesting introduction to Laurel and Hardy. You certainly see one of the biggest factors to them and why they were so great, and that's their love for each other.
Yeah, and they recreated a scene from this movie, the commence to dancing sequence.
One of my favorite things in the world. So we need to talk about that for sure.
So what is it exactly? Let's get into more like details. What do you love about this movie? We've already talked about Stan and Laurel and their comedic chemistry
Yeah.
with each other. But what is it about, I guess, this one that you think is a highlight, or why you wanted to talk about this movie?
Because I think it's the best example of, as far as their features go, for sure. It's to me, the best summation of everything great about Laurel and Hardy. You see their companionship, you see them quarreling, you see their love for each other. It's a simple story told really well. It has wonderful music in it, which isn't, outside of the Laurel and Hardy theme song, which I am requesting you put that into this episode, Chris.
Okay.
That is the Cuckoo song, or the Dance of the Cuckoos. It's like at the beginning of every one of their shorts, and I think you hear it a bit in Way Out West as well. So that needs to be in here. But no, Way Out West, it just perfectly captures everything that's wonderful about them, and that's seen. There's not a better example of that than the dance that they do towards the beginning of the movie, which you mentioned. That is to the song "At the Ball, That's All." They walk upon this bar, because we'll get into, I guess, the plot of the movie. But there's a band playing outside, and that band is the Avalon Boys, who are a popular quartet in the 30s. And I guess they appeared in a handful of other films. But you just see them there, and they just kind of look at each other, and they're just listening to this band play this really kind of catchy, sweet song, about a guy trying to basically, romance a girl, dance with a girl. And they just start dancing. And yeah, there's no reason for it, but
there's no reason, but it's delightful.
It's delightful. And it's just, to me, in like the history of film and cinema, it's one of the just most joyful things that I have ever seen on camera. And it is something that I can put on anytime, and it makes me happy. I don't know if there's any other clip. I mean, there's plenty of things I can watch to make me smile, but this is at the very top of the list. I will put this on, and immediately anything that I'm worried about, it goes away, because I just see these two people that I love, that are just so just bring so much heart to what they do. And it's just the most delightful, charming dance. If I ever meet someone and get married, I want this song at my wedding. Sorry, honey.
That's going to be a special request.
I'm sorry. If you exist. So yeah, Way Out West, man. There's just so many elements to it that I think encapsulates their humor, from different gags to the comedic foil they have in this movie, which is James Finlayson, and we'll get into him. He's one of Laurel and Hardy's best rivals, that he's in many shorts. And so they just have that great back and forth with him. He has some of the best reactions ever. And
yeah, his reactions are insane.
So
we'll get into it in a second.
Yeah.
But I wrote something down that kind of confused me. So in my notes, I have Stan Laurel, period.
Yes.
He's so great. Just his delivery. I mean, I like Oliver Hardy fine, but yeah, his Stan Laurel's just like the face that he makes. It just cracks me up every single time.
Yeah.
I really liked the opening of this movie, just like setting up the bar and the atmosphere.
Oh, yeah.
It's like a small thing, but it's something you don't really see in like comedies like this too often.
And a great song. Won't You Be My Lovey-Dovey?
Yeah, which I thought it was something else. I don't remember what it was, but for some reason I thought something inappropriate was being sung there at the beginning, and I was like, "Oh, this must have been a pre-code movie." Holy crap!
It's sung by Sharon Lynn, who's playing Lola Marcel, one of the antagonists of the film, who is the wife of the.
Oh yeah, owner. I thought Honey Bunny was horny something, but I was wrong. The It Happened One Night reference. Stan Laurel lifts up his leg.
Oh yeah, to get a cab. Yeah,
shows his leg to get the cab. That was funny.
Yeah.
It Happened One Night would have been like a huge movie. At the time, so that's funny. I don't know if that plays for many modern day audiences, but I got it.
I'm glad you got it.
I was Captain America. I understood that reference. I love the on top of the how on top of the lady and the coach they are when they're riding into town.
So this is one of the great things about Ollie. He like kind of sees himself as a ladies' man through a lot of their shorts and things like that. He has a gag that he does with his tie, and he goes, "Hello, girls," which I think if you saw Stan and Ollie, you've seen that. He just thinks he's a ladies' man, and you just see him and like Stan quarreling over this woman, and like Stan kind of takes his hat off, which is I guess a sign that he's interested. And Ollie's immediately like, "No, bro, just like." She's mine. Like, back up. Like, what are you doing? But like
I was confused though. She acts like kind of charmed by them when they're in the cab, but as soon as they get out, she's like, she says that they were annoying her the entire time.
Well, his like way of like hitting on her is so weird. He's just like, some weather we're having.
You ready for Christmas?
Yes. And he's just like laughing hysterically. It's just, and then he tries the classic arm move, and then Stan does it at the same time, and it's so great. It's so good. It's so good.
Once they get into the bar and meet the saloon owner, like we already talked about it, his faces. I've had a hole in my shoe before, so I can relate to Stan Laurel.
He takes a piece of fucking meat that's supposed to be like leather because you hear a patron say that, and he like puts it in his shoe, and it's such a silly gag.
One of my favorite quotes: "If is it true he's dead? I hope it is. They buried him.
They buried him today." And he just Stan Laurel's delivery is second to none. He's just so like deadpan.
It's
like,
very deadpan.
Yeah, it's perfect.
I would almost describe the two of them like if it's almost like if Charlie Chaplin and Buster Keaton had joined forces and were like forced to do talkies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
it's almost like that.
It is. And I know Charlie Chaplin transitioned to talkies a bit more so than I think. I don't know what Buster Keaton's history is with talkies. But
he did not transition.
No, I think that's
he got drunk.
That's the other thing about Laurel and Hardy. Their silent films are great. Like I watched several of them recently, or, yesterday. They're fantastic, but they transition to talkies seamlessly because their voices just fit their character to a T. It amplified their characters, if anything. And so they just embodied that fully. And like you watch the silent films and like you kind of have a voice in your head probably if you're watching them if you hadn't seen one of their talkies, and then you watch their talkies and you're like, oh yeah, that's the voice I heard. Yeah,
and it makes sense because they're vaudevillian style performers.
Yeah.
And in vaudeville you would have been talking for the audience anyway. Yeah, so I mean
they have that background. I mean, Stan, it's master pantomime, obviously, as you can see from his physical comedy. Oliver Hardy.
Yeah, it's not. Yeah, it's not totally reliant on just physical humor the way that Buster Keaton stuff was.
No, not that those guys are masters. We're not taking anything away from them.
So I have the saloon. I have the saloon owner's reaction to "Every bird can build a nest."
Yeah. Every bird can build a nest, but not every. It's like every bird can build a nest, but it isn't every bird that can lay an egg or something like that, right? Yeah, every bird.
Right. Yeah. I think it just went over my head for a second.
It doesn't make much sense.
But his reaction is so insane that it makes you think that you're missing something.
It is. Any bird can build a nest, but it isn't everyone who can lay an egg.
Okay. Yeah.
So my favorite.
It's just kind of nonsense.
It is nonsense.
But his reaction is so incredulous.
My favorite line outside of the one that we just talked about ever, like about I hope he is. We buried him today. So there's a maid that they like works for this bar for the bar owner and his wife named Mary Roberts, and that's who Laurel and Hardy are there to see. They got a deed to a gold mine because her father passed away, and for whatever reason, it was tasked to Laurel and Hardy to deliver this deed to Mary Roberts.
Let's let these two fools take care of it.
Who knows why, but they're Laurel and Hardy, so that's why. And so, of course, the bar owner gets an idea, like, we want to steal this deed. They don't know who Mary Roberts is. So Lola Marcel, the singer at the beginning of the movie, who's his wife, poses as Mary Roberts. And anyway, so she gets the mine. They give her the deed. And as they're leaving the scene, Stan says to her, now that you've got the mine, I bet you'll be a swell gold digger.
Yeah.
No, he kicks him, and James Finlayson shoves him out. And he's like, he has no idea that
That's
he's
it.
saying something like crude. It's so great.
Yeah, that's great. Pretty racy stuff in the with Stan in bed with Lola.
Oh yeah, later on, yeah.
When they're tickle fighting, essentially.
That whole sequence. Stan Laurel also has the. It's interesting. He has one of the best cries you'll ever see, and he also has the most contagious laugh like ever. And so the fact that he could do both
Incredibly,
of those,
it must be contagious because he was still laughing like well after he was being tickled.
Yeah, he's just looking in his chest and going. I mean, when you like, if someone's tickling you that much, you have the giggles afterwards. But like, it's so great.
It's true.
Yeah, there's just an extended sequence of them exchanging the trying to pass the deed back and forth when they discover that they were lying about being Mary Marcel. They were lying about being Mary Roberts, and but I think we should talk about the thumb gag with the fire.
That was my next thing I had. I love the thumb lighter.
Yeah, that's a very classic
it's a running
gag. Yeah, and they built upon it in a later movie. I think it's Blockheads, where like Stan like smokes out of his thumb, and there's a whole thing with that. But yeah, it's just like this classic. There's like promotional like stills and stuff with that gag. Really just funny, original, creative thinking. And again, something that's very Looney Tunes.
The whole rope bit is my favorite. Mm-hmm. When the mule goes in the air,
poor mule.
I just lost it.
That poor mule. So they're like, they're trying to sneak back into this bar to get the deed to give to Mary Roberts, and they come in on a mule, and they like tie the like. There's a whole like back and forth with Ollie and Stan, which is just part of their. If you watch a lot of their shorts, a lot of them they're either quarreling with a rival or a foil, or they're quarreling with each other basically, and usually it's both. But they're like Ollie wants him to tie the rope in a certain way to kind of bring him up to the second floor, and I think initially like he's not tying it right, and he keeps like tripping up Ollie, and Ollie tries to
see the gag coming a mile away, but it's still great.
Yeah, so Ollie like they tie
a rope around this mule, and then of course he gets off the mule, so the mule just goes flying into the air.
It's so good.
I lost it. It's so funny.
And Ollie has the just the best screams. He's just he's so good at just screaming like bloody murder, but like in such an animated and comedic way that it's like you can't help but bust out laughing anytime he does. And
Oliver kind of turns gangster when he just holds a gun to Lola.
Yeah,
to the saloon owner. He just like holds him at gunpoint to get. It's like he's expediting this quite fast.
Mm-hmm. Ollie doesn't mess around, man. He's gets business done. We should mention the so there's a few songs in this movie. One of the other ones is a great number with Trail of the Lonesome Pine, and you might if you've watched it, you can probably tell Oliver Hardy was a great singer. He was a very trained singer.
I was wondering if it was how much. Obviously, it's dubbed when it goes when Stan Laurel starts. His voice starts going
that's
high
not
and then low.
The low voice is actually one of the guys from the band at the beginning of the movie, and I don't remember who the women.
The high one is the woman who played Mary.
Oh, was it? Oh, shit. That's cool. But yeah,
I knew something you didn't.
But yeah, I love that number. It just like starts off with them singing together and harmonizing pretty well, and then all of a sudden Stan starts to goof off, and Ollie's just like whacks him in the head with a vase. And then Stan passes out, like
as you do.
Later on. It's great. It should be noted the score of this movie was nominated for an Academy Award. It was composed by Marvin Hatley, which it's a great score. So, I do want to. So let's get into James Finlayson. There's a cool little trivia here for you that you probably don't know unless you looked it up. So he does it a couple times in this movie. He has this. We've talked about his expressions. But another thing he does is this "do" kind of thing. When he's like quarreling with them. That "do" is what inspired Homer Simpson's "dough." He inspired it. There's a clip of Dan Castellaneta talking about like recording, "dough" for the first time. And I think initially it did it a little longer because he was like, there's this actor, James Finlayson from Laurel and Hardy, one of the great foils. And he did this "dough." And he's like, because I think there was like in the script, it was just like, in the Simpsons script, it was just like unspecified grunt or something like that. And so they just wanted him to come up with something. And so he used that as inspiration, but they wanted him to shorten it. So he just shortened it to dope. So that's where it comes from, everybody. It comes from Laurel and Hardy, James Finlayson. So
cinema history.
The more you know. One of the most classic catchphrases ever. Yes.
We're going to be one of those podcasts that bring up The Simpsons in every episode somehow.
That probably wouldn't be hard to do. I mean, The Simpsons have done everything. The movie has I don't know, do you spoil the endings of the movies on this show?
I think if it's an important one, no.
I mean, you could spoil this ending, probably.
I don't think it's that big.
Yeah.
I don't think it's that big of a deal with this movie.
There's no big twist here.
The movie's an hour long.
Yeah.
There's no big twist. Yeah.
Has a happy ending. They get the deed back. It's a pretty cut and dry. They put him at gunpoint, tie him up in a fun. James Finlayson up in a funny way. They get the deed back. They get Mary Roberts. I love the whole like explanation that like when they tell Mary Roberts what's going on. Like Ollie is like stuck in the floor because like he fell through the floor and his head is sticking out.
Oh yeah.
And so like they put a bucket over him to hide him from James Finlayson who's coming to investigate. And afterwards, he just takes Mary Robert into a closet and just explains to her. And you just see him like through a window, just explain to her for like 30 seconds.
I love that because how often in a comedy does someone actually get to explain what's going on to somebody?
Yeah, show don't tell,
and it resolves the issue like pretty quickly.
It's the classic thing is always like as a screenwriter, it's like show don't tell, and this is them. You're showing him telling, but you're showing him. You're not hearing him tell it. You know, it's great. It's a great kind of runaround on that.
Yeah.
So yeah, they end up walking back on a donkey with another on the mule with another cute song. I Want to Be in Dixie, which was I think an Irving lyrics are by Irving Berlin. That song, the great Irving Berlin, and just a really sweet ending. This movie is just. It's so quaint, you know. It's a small story. It isn't like if you watch a Marx Brothers movie, and some of their movies have bigger stories than this. I mean, but it's just a quaint little story. It's like one of their two reelers that they stretched into like a feature, probably more or less. But it's so well told, and there's so many fun moments in it, and I think it's just the perfect introduction to Laurel and Hardy. If you're going to watch one of their features, I mean, their shorts are great intros, but if you want to really get an idea of who they are. With the dance number, which is just still one of my favorite things. This is it. So I'm really glad I was able to come on here and talk about it with you. And
why? For you, like, why is this movie still important today? Like, if you're gonna like sell somebody, I guess, on this movie, like, why do you think this one is important?
Because Laurel and Hardy are important, and this is one of their best pieces of work, in my opinion. More people need to know about Laurel and Hardy. It's just as simple as that. They inspired so many of your favorite comedians. If you watch like a Jim Carrey, Dick Van Dyke, any kind of modern comedian is going to know who Laurel and Hardy are. Steve Martin, anybody, your favorite actors today. They've inspired things like the Looney Tunes. There's no doubt about it. Stars from that era, Abbott and Costello. Lou Costello was a huge fan of Stan Laurel. He was in a Laurel and Hardy short actually in the background in one of their early shorts. Fun fact. And so they were so influential. And, I have like a book and I'll share some quotes here actually really quickly, just a couple of brief ones that just give you an idea of what some people thought of them. But even like in their time, like as much as they were appreciated, they didn't get as much attention as like Charlie Chaplin did or Buster Keaton did. And there's a quote from Stan Laurel's funeral, and Buster Keaton was there, and he kind of spoke, and he said, Chaplin wasn't the funniest, I wasn't the funniest, this man was the funniest. And it's true, and it's not to take anything away from what they did. I think, watched Modern Times for the first time, actually. It's brilliant. Chaplin, his skills, he's a master. But I can't say I laughed that much. I was just like in awe of the set pieces and just the meticulousness of that movie and all the gags and just the thought that had to go into that. And just, him as a performer or pantomime, he's great. But the greatest comedy duo of all time is Stan Laurel and Oliver Hardy. Yeah. And so Here's some funny quotes here. I'll just read briefly. There's one from this guy. I guess I'll end with that because I think it's one of the best encapsulations of why Laurel and Hardy, really what makes them so great. But Groucho Marx has a quote here, and he's like, "You ask me if I find them funny. I don't find them at all these days, but when I do, I find them funny." And I find them funny, among other reasons, because Stan Laurel had a skinny neck and Oliver Hardy had a fat stomach. As to why they are really funny, I leave that to the professors and the savants. I gave up trying to find out why people are funny a long, long time ago. That's just Groucho Marx being Groucho Marx.
Yeah.
I will share this quick one. Dick Van Dyke has a big thing here, but I'm not going to share the whole thing. But he says, Laurel and Hardy were really a love story, one of the greatest there ever was. I think the basis for the longevity in films was that they obviously loved each other very much. That is what sustained those movies in between the gags. Of course, like children in a fit of pique, they would hit each other, but never to hurt. Their trust and their love was childlike with a basic underlay of innocence. And then I'm going to end at least this part with something Romeo Miller said. Romeo Miller, you're not going to know his name, but he wrote like pretty much every Rankin Bass Christmas special. So this December, look for his name. He wrote pretty much all of them except I think The Year Without a Santa Claus, but every single other one he like wrote. Romeo Miller. He said, "Why do I like Laurel and Hardy? Like is a totally irrelevant word. Even love is inadequate. I revere clowns. A great comic personality is the most human of all artistic creations. For humanity really is not much more than a rather disorganized parade of all the little fellows whom the greatest clowns represent. And to me, Laurel and Hardy are the most human of all. They seldom win. Most of us seldom win. Stan and Ollie are a part of me. Like them, I stumble from one nice mess into another, and when I come up with some improbable solution, the Stan in me always agrees with an enthusiastic, that's a good idea. The Ollie reassures with a hearty, it certainly is. And off I go again. Chaplin, Keaton, Lloyd, and the others usually come out on top for the final fade out. Very gratifying. Very gratifying. But I somehow know that unlike Charlie, I'm never going to clean up Easy Street. I'm never going to strike gold, reform Timania, capture the Kaiser, or walk up into the sunrise with a smiling Paulette Goddard. It is far more likely that after all my good intentions have gone awry, I'll end up flattened between two streetcars or up to my ears in that astounding mud puddle, which always awaits halfway down the block. But like the boys, I know that one way or another I'll always be back with more good ideas, dead certain that I'll get that piano to the top of the hill. Yes, Laurel and Hardy mean a lot to me. In days like these, when the illusion of winning seems so all-important, they make the inevitability of losing and then continuing so touching and sublime. I think that's that's Laurel and Hardy. That's why this movie's important, because they're important. They're so sympathetic, and they loved each other in real life. They were the best of friends. When Oliver Hardy passed away, Stan Laurel didn't want to keep going. You know, he had offers to like kind of do more on screen, and he just refused. And
it's a real Beastie Boys situation.
You know, you look at Martin and Lewis. Some great movies, but they had a notorious feud and hated each other eventually.
They hated each other so much.
Abbott and Costello, eventually had a falling out. You know, it happens. Laurel and Hardy, never. Mm-hmm. And you can see in the movie Stan and Ollie, that's kind of, what it ends up with. And they just, their love is what shines through, I think, all of their work. And that's why they have such great chemistry. They're just, they were brilliant and before their time. And why aren't they bigger names now? It's 2024. They didn't get the love they deserved in their time. And this came out in like 83. And these are like, there's a lot of quotes there from people from, that grew up with them that were in some of their productions. I think they were, a lot of their movies they were shown before like feature films and things like that. They weren't seen as the main attraction probably. They were,
Yeah. I think also we've talked about their innocence as well.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's not something that's particularly upheld. I mean, with the Marx Brothers, there's like a lot more of a cynical edge to them.
Oh yeah.
With Keaton and Chaplin, there's more of a technical, I think, impressiveness that film historians really put a lot of emphasis on. But with Laurel and Hardy, it is very childlike and it is very sort of appealing on a simple but just out of pure joy kind of nature to it. And they had such a link with vaudeville comedy that I also think is important.
Yeah.
And it's a great reminder of how film started, that a lot of these early movies were these entertainers who had been working for years and years and years and just putting their act out there for the entire world to see.
Yeah.
And it was so popular, to film goers in the 1930s. And I think that's also probably a great reason for it to still be looked at, to still be relevant. And it's still funny.
Oh,
so if your kids don't like Chaplin, you should show them this.
I think this would honestly be a better introduction to silent comedy than Chaplin for sure. I do think Chaplin's great, but if you want like just something to laugh at, Laurel and Hardy every day, all day. And this is someone that hasn't seen a ton of Chaplin. I saw Keaton before Chaplin. I think like Keaton as a character more than Chaplin. I don't know if Keaton's movies are better than Chaplin's per se, but like
they're not.
Yeah, but as a character, I always kind of like Buster Keaton a little more. But like I was also introduced to him first. Sure. I think the Tramp character. I mean, Modern Times is great. I think I found Keaton maybe a little more endearing, but that's besides the point because Laurel and Hardy, there's no one more endearing than them. And so and a lot of their shorts are on YouTube. You can watch them in great quality. There's some great.
You took the transition right out of my mouth. I was going to say, Way Out West is on YouTube. Mm-hmm. You can watch it for free, and it's only an hour. So go watch it.
All their stuff.
If you want to own it, you can buy it online, and then you can just own it.
I mean, I don't know what their longest movie is. It's probably like maybe 70 minutes, but most of their two-reelers are all 20-something minutes. They have some great three-reelers. Those are like 30 minutes. A couple maybe four-reelers, which are 40 minutes. But yeah, they're fantastic. If I recommended another like full-length movie, Our Relations is hilarious. Probably funnier than Way Out West. I mean, Way Out West is great. But I would say from like a laugh a minute perspective, Our Relations, I think is a little funnier. And I think it's underrated. It's so good. I think on one of the big Laurel and Hardy YouTube channels, that has the most views, surprisingly. If I would recommend another, I mean, you can just go on a marathon and watch their shorts. The Music Box is, to me, always goes to the top of the list. It won an Oscar. You can still see the stairs in Silver Lake. I visited them the other day. My office is like 5 minutes from there. I didn't know idea. It was really great to discover that.
That's insane.
Yeah.
So crazy.
I mean, I knew I had to be close. I just cause I've been there, several times, but it just had been a couple of years, I think, since I last visited. And they're still in good shape.
Man, love that so much about Los Angeles. Yeah. Just finding all these relics of old Hollywood.
Laurel and Hardy are so great, and so fun to come on here and talk about it with you. Instead of something gory like we used to. Not that I don't like gory movies.
Well, Zach,
but,
oh yeah, I'm sure we'll find an old gory movie.
Well, if I come back on, I have the other movie that we debated talking about.
Don't
it's not a horror movie.
Don't mention it. But we'll save it for later.
Yeah.
We'll save it for later. Well, Zach, thanks so much for joining me today. Is there anything you want to promote?
If you enjoyed hearing Chris and I talk, you can check out the podcast we did for 4 years along with our buddy Casey. It's called Another Miserable Podcast. Yes, our back catalog. It's called Another Miserable Podcast, Horror Decomposed. It is still up on like every streaming platform and YouTube. So yeah, check that out if you want to hear us talk about horror movies and horror pop culture. It was a good time. And if you want to follow me on, if you want to follow me on, me too, on Instagram, at Earth2Zach, Earth2 Zach, and Letterboxd, Earth2Zach, Earth2 Zach.
Sweet. I'll put all your links.
Link it up.
In the notes
Link it up
for this podcast.
Oh gosh.
All right. Well, we love old movies. I'm sure you do too. If you're listening to this, you can reach out to us on Threads or other social medias that we might be on. We'll put that in the description as well, I'm sure, or through classiccinemasocietypod@gmail.com. Please let us know what you thought of Way Out West. You can find me on Threads at Chris Pistol. That's just me. If you want to just follow me just for kicks and giggles, make sure to subscribe and share this podcast. One of the best ways to help us is leave a 5-star review. It's really the best way to help us reach more classic movie nerds like you. Thanks for listening. My voice is about to be gone.
I like your outro.